Hello, it's May 23rd and this is the New Arab Weekly podcast from the New Arab in London. Each week we look at the biggest stories from the week and ask what happened and what does it all mean. Joining us to unpack the last 7 days in the Middle East, we have analysis editor Charlie Hoyle.
Hello.
And opinions editor Benjamin Ashraf.
Hi, Hugo.
All shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of all things shall be news. On with the show. So big stories this week. We're going to start with you, Ben. What happened?
Well, Iranian President Ebrahim Raisi, the Iranian Foreign Minister Hossein Amir Abdullahian, and 6 other senior Iranian officials were killed on Sunday, Hugo, in a freak helicopter accident over northwestern Iran near the Azerbaijani border. Initially reported as a hard landing, a bit of newspeak there. Their deaths have since prompted a number of conspiracy theories and cast doubt over the country's succession plans and wider Iranian political stability. Raisi's death was announced on state media on Monday, May 20th.
خادم جمهور ایران آیت الله دکتر سید ابراهیم رئیسی رئیس جمهور اسلامی ایران در راه خدمت به مردم به درجه رفیع شهادت.
A big news, obviously, Ben. What happened? You know, where were they coming from? Who was there? What on earth was going on?
Sure. Well, on Sunday evening, a helicopter carrying, as I said, Ebrahim Raisi, Foreign Minister Hossein Amir Abdullahian, and 6 other Iranian officials were returning from the far western Iranian province of East Azerbaijan, having opened a joint hydroelectric power project with their Azerbaijani neighbours. And among the attendees at those 2 dam openings were Raisi's Azerbaijani counterpart, Ilham Aliyev. And so on their return leg, flying over the mountainous Varsakan region, the helicopter encountered severe weather conditions, including thick fog, which engulfed the area, which caused the helicopter to crash near the remote village of Tawil. Rescue teams rushed to the wreckage, but there were no survivors. On who was there, besides Raisi and Abdullahian, other dead include Malik Rahmati, who was the Governor-General of East Azerbaijan, and also the Shia cleric of that region, Muhammad Ali Aleh Hashim, and also the commander of the President's Protection Unit, Sardar Saeed Mehdi Musawi, was also killed alongside the pilot and his crew. Interestingly, the Iranian Meteorological Association had issued severe weather warnings the day prior, and his death has actually called into question some of the Air Force's fleet, they were operating a Bell 212.
What's that?
Well, yes, exactly. Well, it's a antiquated US aircraft which was first flown in 1968, if you can believe. So most of the Iranian...
That's a long time ago.
It is a long time ago, especially for a helicopter flying over a mountainous region in fog.
And carrying the president.
And so most of that air fleet was actually purchased prior to the Iranian Revolution, just to put into perspective how long ago it was that the helicopter was operating from.
Yeah. Obviously, you've got the weather conditions, an antiquated American helicopter, but like with all these things, suspicions abound, perhaps particularly when maybe the Iranians are involved. So let's go wild with speculation and conspiracy theories. What were they? Were there any? And is there any truth to any of them?
Sure. Well, yeah, as always, timing is key. And I guess in the context of Israel's war on Gaza and heightened Iranian-Israeli tensions, if you remember, about a month ago now, the rockets that flew over Jordan over into Israel.
See previous episodes of New Arab
I'm sure
Weekly.
You've got a good one. But yeah, as you said, there's been a whole host of conspiracy theories that have come out. I've got my favourite.
Yes, go.
And it was actually aired on the French-Israeli news outlet I-24. And it was that there was a mysterious man, an Israeli man, shock, and his name was Helicopter.
Helicopter.
Yeah.
Is this the Iranian version of like the man on the grassy knoll?
Well, I was following some of the Israeli media outlets, and they were debating whether it was with a K or with a C. What do you reckon? So is it copter or copter?
I think
which sounds more menacing.
K.
Okay.
Certainly. And
Yeah.
also, with a C, it's far too obvious, isn't it? You're not going to hide anything there.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, it wasn't just the Israelis that were rife with suspicion, the Iranians as well. And the main culprit for the Iranians was actually, and we'll get onto this later, I hope, but it actually has to do with the secession of Iran's supreme leader. And they were saying it was an inside job, and rather it was the son of the current Iranian supreme leader, Mujtaba. So remember the name, because he's going to come up later.
Remember that.
But can I just finish about what actually happened, because I think it's important for me not to
I think that is important.
But yeah, as we mentioned before, it's probably the fact that it was awful weather. It was an antiquated helicopter, not helicopter.
Yeah.
And if you're to get any analysis from it, I think it actually points to the effects of US sanctions, because all these US-built helicopters can't be maintained.
Yeah.
There's
Can't get the parts and things.
no
like
parts
this.
and stuff like that. And so, but just to bring it full circle, I think it does say something about why was the Iranian president was flying in this aircraft, and why did they choose to disregard the meteorological advice?
Yeah. I'm sure those are going to be questions asked in Iran for the next few weeks. A world leader has died, liked and disliked in different measures. International reaction, what's the international community been saying? Who's been sending big bunches of flowers and cards saying what a wonderful person he was?
Well, yeah.
And who's been sending the opposite?
As you can expect, reaction has been mixed, reflecting Iran's rogue status in some circles and heroic status in other. Heavy hitters such as Vladimir Putin described Raisi as an outstanding leader, with his death an irreplaceable loss. China, for their part, described the helicopter crash as a tragic loss to the Iranian people, and Lebanon and Pakistan both announced one day of mourning. Now, you can expect, though, as well, that the Iranian axis of resistance, so for those that aren't aware, that's Lebanon's Hezbollah, Palestine's Hamas, and Yemen's Houthis. They also mourned Raisi and those killed in the crash. And just for the opposite, there was a couple of interesting things. So the European Union, through European Council leader Charles Michel, they expressed sincere condolences. And in fact, even the British UNSC, so the Security Council representative, even stood to respect, to pay his respects rather in the chamber. But as to be expected, the United States played a pretty silent role, and analysts are saying, because it's a lose-lose in both occasions, if you come out and pay your respects, then that doesn't look great.
No.
And if you go out and criticize him or attack him, that's also not great.
No.
So they are paying attention very heavily of what's happening, but I think strategically it's strategic silence from them.
Yeah.
Less silence from Israel, and they have gone out calling him the butcher of Tehran, blood on his hands, etc., to be expected.
Which, I mean, at the risk of siding with Israel, isn't wholly unfair criticism. I mean, Raisi did have a notorious reputation.
Yeah, particularly in the 80s.
Inside Israel,
in the domestic
inside Iran
scene,
and out, yeah.
Yeah.
We've had a funeral since he died, as is tradition. What happened? Was it a big event? Lots of mourners?
Was it a big event? I'll let you answer that question. Yeah, tens of thousands of people at least. And it's come in two stages. So funeral rites in the Islamic tradition mean that it's almost immediately, that they begin almost immediately. And they began on Tuesday for Raisi and his entourage, where processions began through the Iranian city of Tabriz and the Shia clerical center of Qom, which is like the heavy-hitting city where all the top Shias come from. So yeah, in Qom in Tabriz there were tens of thousands of black-clad mourners. Yesterday, which is Wednesday the 22nd. Huge crowds were in Tehran, so the bodies moved over to Tehran, where the Supreme Leader gave prayers at the University of Tehran. Yesterday, the funeral was a star-studded affair, and the Iranian state media even went so far as saying that 60 countries may have been represented, including Tunisian President Kais Saied, Qatari Emir Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, Deputy Leader of Lebanese group Hezbollah Naim Qasim, and Ismail Haniyeh, who's head of the Hamas political bureau, and he in fact gave a speech saying that the Islamic Republic of Iran will continue its support for the Palestinian people, whilst the crowd shouted "Death to Israel." So it was quite a big event. But just on kind of movers and shakers there as well, the top diplomat of Egypt, Sameh Shoukry, was also there, and it's the first time that
that's significant.
It is significant because it's the first time an Egyptian foreign minister has been to Tehran since the revolution. So, clearly he had his supporters and his detractors, but most definitely his funeral is a big event, and you've seen that in the attendees.
Missing now in Iran is a president, so they're going to need one of those in the near future, undoubtedly. What next? I'm guessing elections. When are they going to be? Who's going to be running?
Well,
or rather, maybe who's going to be allowed to run?
Well, there you go. And I hopefully I can speak for me and Charlie here in saying that we just finished commissioning for the previous election, which was just a month or so ago. So we've got another one to work through. But yeah, so I mean, on Monday when the death was announced, basically the Supreme Leader rushed to say it's normality as usual. The Iranian constitution is pretty firm, and according to the said constitution, they have to announce an election in the next 50 days. And they've done just that by saying that the election is going to be held on the 28th of June, so just over a month's time. But, even the one in May, it was blighted by the fact that there was low turnout, and it had previously, in previous Iranian presidential elections, it was kind of the thing that they would say would give legitimacy to their theocracy and their system, was by saying that there was high election turnouts. Now we're seeing that turnout drop significantly from
below 50%, I think.
41%, exactly, yeah.
And that was the local elections, though. That wasn't presidential.
That's right, exactly. Yeah. But the fears remain. The fears remain in saying that, well, the Supreme Leader has a bit of a conundrum on his hands. Does he allow the election with Raisi's death to be a free-for-all, an open ballot, and risk the possibility of a reformist candidate coming into play? Or is he going to do what he did in the previous election by basically blocking any kind of reformist candidates and just allowing Supreme Leader approved candidates?
There'll be like continuity candidates, essentially, right?
Exactly. And just to tell our listeners who those candidates may be, so right now we've got a short list of Mohammed Muqbar, who is the first vice president and now acting president whilst the elections are being organised. You've also got Mohammed Bagher Ghalibaf, who is the Speaker of the Iranian Parliament since 2020, Ali Larijani, who had been the Speaker of the Iranian Parliament from 2008 to 2020, and then also, who some of you may remember, the former Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif, who was the Foreign Minister from 2013 to 2021.
He negotiated the nuclear deal.
Yeah, exactly. So he presided over a particularly tumultuous period of Iranian foreign relations. So if you like that period of foreign relations, you love it. Yeah, Zarif. So, but yeah, as I mentioned, just to tie that all up, is that it's going to put the process into the spotlight. And so, is it going to be a reformist candidate? Is it not? But, what one thing is for certain is that there's unlikely to be major protests / reform because, Iran right now is in a particularly vulnerable situation. And, when you have a regime in charge, it's likely to batten down the hatchets and make sure that no surprises, basically.
We touched on it briefly. Succession. Not the hit HBO show, but the hit Iranian Supreme Leader show. Khamenei currently is there. I think he's 85. He will die. Because it happens to the best of us. Raisi was the front runner to succeed him. He's unlikely to be able to do that now. So who are the front runners now?
Yeah. And I mean, it's kind of interesting that, you speak to people, and perhaps the most significant result of the helicopter crash is going to be who the next supreme leader is going to be, not the next president. And Ebrahim Raisi was being groomed for that position. I was reading actually a very interesting article today about the curse of succession. And, quite a few of them that had been groomed for it have already died. And they include Hashemi Rasfajani, who died under mysterious circumstances in 2017. And then there was others as well that either have died or have been seen as being detractors of the regime. So basically, what I mean to say is that list, that long list, has become a short list, which is becoming an even shorter list with Raisi's death. And, earlier I mentioned the prodigal son. And it's likely that he is now in the front-running seat. So Mujtaba Khamenei, who's the second son, and there's also if you're a betting man, which I don't think there are many betting shops in Iran, but if you were to be a betting man in Iran, you might want to have an outside bet on Ali Reza Arafi, who's a senior cleric. The only polling we've got so far on it has been an excellent poll done by BBC Persian in March the 2nd, of this year, in which they asked, who would be the next supreme leader, and at that time it was neck and neck between Mujtaba Khamenei and Raisi. So, if that poll is anything to go by, then it's a pretty clear run for Khamenei's second son.
It'll be interesting to see what happens. I've just looked it up. A particular British gambling website is not offering odds on the Iranian Supreme Leader.
They're missing out on a trick.
They are.
It's a clear run.
Charlie.
Yeah, no, I was going to ask, you touched on kind of foreign policy and continuity, but do we know that, or do we have any idea whether Raisi's death will impact Iran's nuclear program, for example? Yeah,
it's interesting. It's yesterday we had some news basically. And the spokesperson of the IAEA, which is the International Atomic Energy Agency, they'd said that things had stalled recently in trying to get Iran to cooperate with their supervision, and that obviously this has been further stalled by Raisi's death. From what I understand, Charlie, they're trying to get a bit more leeway and headroom in being able to manage and monitor Iran's nuclear capabilities. And they were going to have discussions about it, but basically it's stalling at the moment. But from reading his report and his statement yesterday, they are if anything dedicated and hot on the heels of the Iranian nuclear facilities to try and see what they've been up to. No major progress on the issues yet, but they've reaffirmed their commitment to checking up on them.
Interesting.
I think we so often have sort of big momentous events in Iran. We've had them over the past few years, and people have looked at them and said, "Oh, maybe this is the time that everything will change in Iran, that regime will collapse," and they never come to pass. And I suspect this might be another one of those times.
Well, it's just to tie everything up. It's the etymology of the phrase "this too shall pass" is from Farsi. So if you want any other indication as to this is basically not going to do anything, you only need to look at their idioms. So
this too shall pass. Our second story this week comes from Charlie and The Hague. What have you got?
So on the 20th of May, the prosecutor for the International Criminal Court, Karim Khan, announced that he was requesting arrest warrants for senior Israeli and Hamas leaders on charges of war crimes and crimes against humanity related to the 7th of October attack and Israel's ongoing war on Gaza.
On the basis of evidence collected and examined by my office, that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Minister of Defense Yoav Gallant bear criminal responsibility for the following international crimes committed on the territory of the State of Palestine from at least the 8th of October 2023. The crimes include starvation of civilians as a method of warfare.
There were some big names mentioned in this and by Karim Khan. Who was named, Charlie?
Yeah, big names indeed, especially on the Israeli side. We have the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. On the Hamas side, we have Mohammed Deif, the head of Hamas's military wing, Ismail Haniyeh, Hamas's political bureau head, and Yahya Sinwar, the Hamas leader in Gaza.
The ICC doesn't deal with shoplifting and that sort of thing. It's pretty serious stuff. So what crimes have they been accused of? Both of them, Israel and Hamas.
These are big ones. The most serious that exist. On the Israeli side, we have crimes including the starvation of civilians as a weapon of war, murder, extermination, and intentional attacks on civilians. And for Hamas, the charges include crimes against fundamental human values, extermination, the taking of hostages, and also accusations of sexual assault and violence alongside torture.
What are these actual arrest warrants now? Or are they...
They are still to come. So this is a request for arrest warrants to be issued. So what happens next, essentially, is that a pre-trial chamber of... including a panel of 3 judges, will now consider whether to actually issue the arrest warrants. Those warrants must name the person, the specific crimes for which the warrant is sought, and a statement of facts. So basically the judges will now review the evidence submitted by the prosecutor and evaluate whether to issue an arrest warrant or not. And
what is... that sounds like a lot. So what is the time frame we're looking at here? What... if I suppose if we do get, how long to get to those arrest warrants?
Yeah.
And then how quickly do we see Israeli and Hamas leaders in the dock at the Hague?
In the dock would...
If ever.
Yeah, right. And the dock is optimistic, but in the sense of, I don't believe any request for arrest warrants has been rejected by the ICC in its history. So some estimates vary from 3 to 6 weeks to months, but I think it's, by all accounts, it's quite certain arrest warrants will be issued. But then taking that process from, arrest warrants being issued to actually ending up at the dock is a huge and lengthy process.
Years,
if ever. It's, if you look at the history of the ICC, it's, it's a new international institution, launched in 1988 and really started functioning in 2002.
They're still going through the war criminals from the Bosnian War.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah.
They're not the speediest.
I think only 32 proceedings have been completed.
So most of them have also been African leaders. Right?
Nearly all have been in African, in the African continent, including North Africa. So the process to get to the dock is lengthy. The ICC cannot try people in absentia. So effectively, if suspects, even if they are apprehended, it could take years to conduct trials. Just because the international court has the highest standards of the international criminal justice system. Yeah. So the full cycle of a case is long.
Israel, I'm guessing they're not too pleased about this. What have they said?
So Israel have responded very aggressively to the charges. Netanyahu has called it a moral outrage of historic proportions. He also, for good measure, has said that Karim Khan, the chief prosecutor, is one of the great anti-Semites in modern times. So yeah, you can see the narrative building on Israel's part.
That's a pretty classic response. Internationally, what's been the response to these? Has it been uniformed or varied?
It's been mixed. I think probably the most, well, maybe not surprising, but the most interesting reaction has been the Western one. Generally, it's wavered between outrageous in the sense, well, with people stressing the point that somehow these arrest warrants or this request for arrest warrants gives a kind of equivalence between Hamas and Israel. which is obviously not the case. They're completely separate in terms of the accusations. Reactions in Europe have kind of varied from appalling and incomprehensible to supporting the work of the ICC and international institutions more generally. So probably the strongest Western response is against it being from the US.
What do they say?
Well, the US is basically, it's not signatory to the ICC, so it doesn't recognize the court's jurisdiction. In that sense, it's also caused a lot of domestic, stirring domestically in US politics. US Congress, for example, has said that it's reviewing all options, including sanctions, to punish the ICC and ensure that the leadership of the ICC faces consequences. I think a really telling example is the Republican Senator Lindsey Graham saying that if they can do this to Israel, we're next. So there's a sense that the ICC as an international institution is almost threatening the autonomy of the US.
Particularly their autonomy to commit war crimes.
Well, exactly, yeah. Exactly.
These are obviously incredibly sort of grave charges that have been brought against Israel, and the repercussions seem quite serious for Israeli leaders. Is this going to change how they're approaching and behaving in Gaza?
Yeah, I don't think so. I'm not sure if I've seen anything to indicate that they will change their policy. I mean, this ramps up pressure that already existed before the ICC arrest warrants. So we have to remember we've had months and months now since ICJ ruling on genocide brought by South Africa,
which hasn't really changed the situation on the ground.
It hasn't changed the situation. It's Israel's still gone into Rafah. Israel's still violated Biden's kind of very blurry red lines, and I think this adds to Israel's victimization narrative and the fact that it's alone in the world. But as long as it has the support of the United States, I think it can continue to pursue its military action, even if it still has undefined political goals.
Let's go, if we go sort of down the line and say what you said, 3 to 6 weeks, maybe a few months, and arrest warrants do come, what then? I mean, how are Israel then, or let's say Netanyahu and Gallant limited?
Yeah.
Can they leave Israel? Are they, is it if they go to France, will France have to arrest them? Are they obliged to do that? And can other countries do business with Israel at that point?
Yep. I mean, essentially, so this quite clearly impacts Israeli leaders more than Hamas leaders. Yeah. For example, Yahya Sinwar is probably didn't expect to survive the Gaza war. Mohammed Deif has no plans to travel, and Ismail Haniyeh is in Qatar, which is not a signatory to the ICC, which means he is fine to stay there. So effectively, what it means is that travel becomes more problematic. Technically, the 124 signatories of the Rome Statute are obliged to arrest or enact arrest warrants against leaders. But, the US is not a signatory to the ICC.
So we can still fly there.
So technically,
but no layovers anywhere.
It's legally, yes, they're required to enact these arrest warrants, but it doesn't necessarily mean that will happen. The court has no means to enforce an arrest, so it has to rely on the goodwill of member states, and that will depend on their kind of relationship with the leader in question. So it's there are also no restrictions actually on political leaders or diplomats from meeting individuals with an ICC arrest warrant against them. The issue really is politically the optics and the symbolism of doing so, because arrest warrants issued by the ICC effectively ostracize global leaders. I mean, we look at Omar Bashir, for example, Sudanese dictator, Vladimir Putin, and now Netanyahu is in that kind of company internationally. So it's extremely bad for Israel in terms of its international reputation. But whether it has any impact is basically down to international politics.
Yeah. in a dance as old as time itself.
Exactly.
What do people say, I mean, after this about the ICC, and particularly is what these nations saying about the ICC directly matching what they're also saying about Israel and their actions in Gaza, or is there sort of a disconnect between the two things?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think effectively what we're seeing is Western allies of Israel scrambling to make a choice between whether they support international law, international institutions, the rule of law, or the ally Israel. I mean, I think the unprecedented nature of this being the first ICC arrest warrant requested for a Western ally means that it's actually unprecedented in terms of how the international community reacts, but especially the West. It was very easy for Western nations to criticize or rather support the ICC arrest warrant issued against Putin, for example.
Yeah.
When it comes to a Western ally like Israel, a country who most Western nations have supported in their military strategy, albeit that's changed slightly over the last few months. They find themselves at a crossroads in terms of maintain support for an ally, and in the process undermine the legitimacy of international institutions like the ICC. So we'll have to see how they react in the future.
Do you wonder if sort of they never? It seems like Western nations sort of just never imagined it happening to, say, quote unquote, one of their own.
Yeah,
it was just not something they imagined.
I don't think they did. Yeah.
Ben, you had something.
And you're talking about the double standards of Western nations, but do you think, Charlie, that the ICC issuing a request for arrest warrants for Israel, does that soften criticism of the double standards within the organisation itself?
Ben. I think it does go. I think it goes some way to changing the perception, potentially in the global south, of the ICC. It's been years, if not decades, in the making that people have called for action at an international level. People were not sure this would happen, and there's been obviously increasing pressure on the court not to issue these arrest warrants. But I think
Karim, I saw there's that clip. I think it was
with Christine Amanpour.
Yeah.
I mean, to his credit, he said, a senior Western leader told him that the ICC was for African leaders and thugs like Putin. So,
exactly. So I think he's even there, he's trying to demonstrate the pressure he's under. And really the perception of the ICC, which is, it's a criminal justice system designed to police the global south and not the West. And I think the reaction by Western countries, I mean, in fairness, India's not a signatory, China's not a signatory. There are several, important global powers that aren't signatories, but they haven't come out and criticized the request for arrest warrants in the same way that the US has, in the most, in the strongest manner, and also the UK. Of course, worried that if the ICC is applied globally, that it would also, create scrutiny on British foreign policy, US foreign policy. So it's been interesting. Yeah, it's been interesting to see the reactions.
Do you think, it has been years and years now that people have been chasing the ICC for something on Israel and their actions against the Palestinians, so I think this is an incredibly significant development.
I think one of the major things that people forget is that Karim Khan's been in the job since 2021, and they've already had cases, or had been planning on doing cases for crimes against humanity and war crimes in East Jerusalem and the occupied West Bank for 2 years. He's been forced to show his hand here because there's a genocide happening. But, there had been 2 years where he's been stumbling and umming and ahhing. And if you look at his own record, he's been quite decisive in other cases. Yeah. So, his own competency is being called into question. And so, like Charlie said, he's going to have to act decisively, both for himself and for the court, for it to have any legitimacy, both for, ICC and for the global south more generally.
I think in fairness too, it's during the sort of 2010s, the Palestinian Authority had this push to join international institutions, like UNESCO. Joining the ICC was part of that in 2015, after becoming an observer member state. I think this is also a reflection in a way that that diplomatic strategy has borne some fruit in the sense that the only reason the ICC can open a case against Israel, which is not a signatory, is because Palestine was recognized as a observer state, and that's positive diplomatically.
It's going to be tough times ahead, I think, for Netanyahu and Gallant, and equally probably tough times ahead for the ICC and what role that plays. Final story from me this week. As Israeli forces continue their attacks across Gaza, the West Bank town of Jenin has also witnessed increased Israeli aggression. On Tuesday, May 21st, the Israeli military entered Jenin, resulting in fighting between occupation forces and Palestinian groups. Israel claimed that they entered the refugee camp to target those that they believe are terrorists, but reports from Palestinians say that many of those who were killed were civilians.
Well, what happened, Hugo? Tell me.
The attack actually happened started before Tuesday. Happened on the Friday when there was an airstrike, a relatively rare occurrence in the West Bank, which killed what Israel would describe as a senior terrorist operative, a man called Ismail Khamisi. He's been accused of being involved in a number of series of attacks, including a 2023 drive-by shooting that killed an Israeli settler. On Tuesday morning, an undercover Israeli unit was discovered in Jenin by Palestinians. That resulted in clashes. Israel armed forces then deployed sort of en masse into the refugee camp. We had reports of indiscriminate shooting by the Israeli forces. We had a group of journalists who were shot at, an ambulance, civilians in a car, and also people in a courtyard in a hospital. They also came in with bulldozers, razing and vandalising roads and vital infrastructure. Also as well, destroying water networks and sewage networks. There's been heavy gun battles in the streets, and today, as we record May 23rd, it was reported that Israeli forces have pulled out.
And who was killed in the Israeli raid?
At least 7 people were killed in total. 19 wounded, 2 are in a serious condition, according to the Palestinian Ministry of Health. 2 of those killed were teenage boys aged 15 and 16. They were killed as they left school. One of them was reportedly riding his bicycle when he was shot. There was a teacher who was also shot as he was leaving school in his car. And it's been reported widely, a general surgery specialist, a doctor, was killed as he was heading towards the hospital, Jenin Governmental Hospital. Local sources have said that at least 10 wounded people have been wounded and were lying in the alleys of the Jenin camp, and that at the time of reporting, medical teams had not been able to reach them.
And what's been the reaction so far from the Israelis and the Palestinians?
Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, he accused the Israeli forces of, quote, violating sanctities, killing innocent people and doctors, and destroying infrastructure, Palestinian hospitals, cities, villages and camps in full view of the world. The Israeli army said that it launched the operation following, quote, intelligence information from the Shin Bet, that's the secret service, indicating the activity of armed terrorists affiliated with Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Hamas condemned the attack. They called it a new massacre in Jenin. Elsewhere, the UN Human Rights Office in Palestine said that it was, quote, horrified by the deadly Israeli attack in Jenin. Elsewhere from the international community, pretty much stone silence, unfortunately.
Hugo, have these types of raids increased in frequency since the start of the war?
Very much so.
Yeah.
Very much so. Since October 7th, just in the West Bank, Israel's killed 502 Palestinians. They've carried out more than 200 military operations in refugee camps. since the start of the war. We've had almost 5,000 people injured, just short of 4,000 people displaced, over 8,000 arrested. Before, as sort of a way of a bit of context there, sort of a lot of numbers really, before October 7th, 199 Palestinians had been killed from the start of 2003 until October 7th. So in those 10 months, you had just short of 200 people killed. And in the, 7 months or so since then, we've had 500 people killed. So the numbers have dramatically increased. Again, in 2022, 154 Palestinians were killed across the whole year, as according to the UN. So the rise is dramatic across.
It's huge.
It's huge.
And if the Gaza war was not happening, but this increase in the West Bank was happening,
It'd be everywhere.
It'd be considered a major escalation.
Major escalation. There was 1,539 people, including 756 children, were forcibly displaced by settlers in 2023. 78% of those displacements happened after October 7th.
Wow. Yeah.
I mean, it is staggering. 2023 was a record year for violence in the West Bank. If the sort of trend continues, 2024 is going to be another tragic record year, unfortunately.
Well, everything that's been happening in Jenin, there has been, in many ways, some light at the end of the tunnel, I think, this week. And with the announcement that 3 countries, or 5 countries, is it, Hugo? That
three so far.
Three so far, yeah. That have announced that they're going to recognise Palestine as a state. Can you just tell me a bit about that diplomatic process, who the countries involved, and what's that practically going to mean?
The 3 countries are Norway, Ireland, and Spain. This was on May 28th. It was a coordinated statement by these 3 countries. They weren't all the same place, but they did coordinate their announcements. The Irish Prime Minister, Simon Harris, he announced the decision at a press conference in Dublin.
On the 21st of January 1919, Ireland asked the world to recognise our right to be an independent state. Our message to the free nations of the world was a plea for international recognition of our independence, emphasising our distinct national identity, our historical struggle, and our right to self-determination and justice. Today, we use the same language to support the recognition of Palestine as a state.
Spain and Ireland both said that their decision to recognise Palestine as a state was not against Israel, and they also said it was not in favour of Hamas. They said it was in support of peace. Israel disagreed, which is unsurprising. They said it's going to create more instability. They recalled its ambassadors to all 3 countries. Netanyahu, he described it as a reward for terrorism. Israel's foreign minister, he said that the three countries' ambassadors in Israel would be summoned for, quote, reprimand talks, during which they were to be shown a video of the abduction of female Israeli soldiers on October 7th. Yeah. Yeah.
That video was circulating on Twitter yesterday, and it was a shocking video, don't get me wrong, but the first thing that people were saying was that the Arabic translation was all wrong. And it was completely completely off. So,
Yeah. But I'm sure that'd be
typical Hasbara.
It was they said it was women who could get pregnant instead of it meaning just women in Palestinian dialect.
Yeah.
It was
On the subject of Hamas, they said in response on this decision by the 3 countries that it was, quote, a turning point in the international position on the Palestinian issue. The Palestinian Authority said that they had, quote, demonstrated their quote, unwavering commitment to delivering a long overdue justice to the Palestinian people. This decision comes off the back of a UN vote that happened quite recently, where you had 143 member states out of 193 at the UN General Assembly who voted in favour of of Palestine joining the UN, which is something that only a state can do.
Yeah.
Along with Israel, the US disagreed with this decision in some sort of weird, odd dualism that they have going on in their mind, where they said US President Joe Biden was a strong supporter of a two-state solution, but also believed that a Palestinian state should be realised through direct negotiations and not through unilateral recognition, which I still don't fully understand.
I think it's fascinating.
Yeah,
I mean, like you said,
mad.
The disconnect between recognizing Palestine as a state is the least controversial thing you could do, given it's really the foreign policy of nearly every nation, in the international community. But it's interesting to note too that Israel's made it clear time and time again that it will not allow the Palestinian state to come into existence. But you're right. I think the US stating that can only happen through negotiations obviously favors Israel. And,
it's just it's insane that like Cameron's saying, "Well, now's not the time," as if like they haven't been saying that the way to expedite the process of a peace process is to recognize Palestine.
Yeah,
and that when countries start doing it, as Charlie said, they're like, no, not now.
Too soon. It's way too soon. And that's interesting too. That it's acting like this has just happened now, whereas we're talking about 56 years.
Ben, you mentioned 5 countries. It has been 3, but 2 others may.
There's an excellent piece by on Charlie's desk about the 5 countries. That's where I initially read it.
Well, it's Slovenia and Malta. Have both said that they are considering a formal recognition.
And I think what's interesting too about that is actually, decision making in the EU is so slow. It requires complete unanimity and consensus. And knowing that there are several EU member states that are totally against Palestinian statehood, it's interesting that these states are broken away, if you like, from the EU process.
Because there are a number of other EU states that recognise them, but they're all former Soviet bloc countries who recognised it in the late 80s.
And ironically or not,
Hungary is one of them.
Yeah, exactly. And ironically or not, most of those states now are probably the most pro-Israel in terms of foreign policy, even if they recognise Palestine as a state. Yeah.
I mean, I think the question now is is whether this is significant or not. Yes, I think in a way it's probably the answer. I think it's also, before we all start getting ahead of ourselves, this is not going to change the situation on the ground in the West Bank.
No,
in the slightest.
No,
I think it is important when it comes to sort of international diplomacy. You do have countries out there who support the Palestinian people, and they support some idea of Palestinian liberation and some sort of notion of freedom for the Palestinian people. It's now you have countries who are supporting all those things, but it's a Palestinian state, which I think is an important differential between a people and a state.
Yeah, and I think when we look at the Gaza war and the fact that there is no political outcome or end game, a Palestinian state would be a tangible outcome. Yep. It would offer incentives for diplomacy. It's obviously, demanded or required under international law. It's the foreign policy of all Western and most international countries. It's completely uncontroversial under international law. But most importantly, it provides an endgame.
Yeah.
And an endgame that everyone's been talking about for years.
That's precisely why Israel doesn't want it, because it can go and act on a whim like it will do as a spiteful country and with a spiteful government, that they will now, withhold taxes from the West Bank because it's the occupier. And like Charlie said, by having a state and you have those parameters of statehood, then those spiteful decisions or those flagrant violations of international law will be harder to justify. Yeah. So,
I think it does also. You have many countries out there who support Israel unconditionally. Today, they are just a little bit more isolated than they were yesterday, which is a good thing.
Yes.
There will be, I think, a test to all this coming up soon. EU elections, beginning of June. It'll be interesting to see where parties who are openly pro-Palestinian come out in that vote, particularly when it's a vote with a lot of far-right candidates who are very supportive of Israel.
Yeah.
while also, strangely, many of them being very anti-Semitic.
Yeah.
So that'll be an interesting
Modern
one
politics.
to watch. Yeah. I'm running a terrible temperature and I'm sweating. That must mean I have election fever. UK election has been called July 4th.
In the rain.
In the rain. It happened while the call was made in the rain. Given the British weather, I imagine much of the election will happen in the rain as well. How bad is this going to be for the Tories, do we think?
Not as bad as our news editor Paul McLaughlin's joke saying that things are only going to get wetter.
Nice.
Yep, I think that covers that story. The Saudi Crown Prince has reassured the country about his father's health after the King was admitted to hospital. The King is 88. They do have very good healthcare in Saudi Arabia, but they can't work miracles there. The Crown Prince is going to take over. Are we going to see, we've seen big shifts in Saudi Arabia recently. They're going to get even bigger, do we think, once the King is out the way?
I think it'll be a continuation. I mean, he's already kind of put his mark on Saudi society, economy, politics. So
they had a swimsuit show this week.
Well, what I'm interested in hearing about what's going to happen after 2030.
Yeah.
Vision 2050.
Oh no!
Yeah.
It's going to be Winter Olympics.
A final one. Israel's Gantz demands Gaza post-war plan, threatens to quit. We talked about this last week. He was sort of rumoured. He's now actually come out and genuinely threatened to quit. Do we believe him, or is it enough? Is this enough of a threat to push them to get in a post-war plan?
I think
which is needed.
He's thinking about election season himself.
So cynical,
and I think, I think he's one of the names that's been put forward and would have Western support if Netanyahu, was ousted or if there were elections. So I think Benny Gantz is kind of America's and the West's man in Israel, and this is part of him trying to separate himself from a cabinet that's clearly failed to develop any post-war strategy. So I think it's obvious electioneering on his part, politicking.
A lot of good stuff on the New Arabs website this week. Ben, you've picked out something?
Yeah, on Opinions this week, we've got Fiona Lally writing about why she called out Suella Braverman's lies live on TV. And it's a bit of, anyone that calls out Suella Braverman has a place in the New Arab. And so, it was good to read her words.
She's one of those Tories set to lose her seat at the election, Suella Braverman.
Fingers crossed.
Charlie?
And on the analysis desk this week, I've chosen a piece by Mohammed Soliman entitled "The Systematic Torture of Gazans in Israel's Secret Prisons." This article unpacks all of the very grim details of the mass arrests of Gazans by Israel during the war and their detention in makeshift facilities and jails where torture and abuse has been rife.
And I picked up something from our investigations desk. Netza Yehud, the veteran, was among guards who intimidated Jerusalem Armenians in November 2023. This is the part 5 of the Armenian quarterfiles, which has been an excellent investigation about a controversial land deal in the occupied East Jerusalem from our investigations unit. And it's that part and all the previous 4 parts are on the website and well worth a read, as are the other 2 articles and everything else. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the New Arab Weekly. This week we were joined by analysis editor Charlie Hoyle and opinions editor Benjamin Ashraf. We'll be back next Friday and every Friday after that. You can subscribe to the New Arab Weekly on Apple, Spotify and wherever else you get your podcasts, and be notified when a new episode drops. You can also rate and review, which helps us spread the word. Until then, if you have any questions for us or stories that you would like us to cover, drop us an email, podcast@newarab.com. That's podcast@newarab.com, or Find us on social media at TNA Podcasts for all the latest news. Don't forget to follow The New Arab on Facebook, X and Instagram for all the latest news, analysis and opinion from the region.